Well, guess what? That's right. Another episode has been approved for public release, but just barely. Wow, did you know that now apparently FAR interpretation is now being outsourced to ring lights and competence? Do you ever hear somebody say something in a meeting that is so stupid, so reckless, so aggressively confident that the whole room goes quiet? Not because it was brilliant, but because everybody is silently trying to determine whether legal needs to be looped in immediately. Yeah, that's today's episode. Because somewhere, right now, in some contractor's office, somewhere in America, somebody is saying, well, I saw it on TikTok. And that's not a joke. It's not a satire. They're not saying it as a cry for help, but as a source. As though a 24-second vertical video made by a guy named Contract Daddy 420 is now equal to legal weight to the FAR and the DFARs and to all the agency supplements, corporate policy memos, internal procedures, and basic human judgment. That's where we are. We have entered an era where people no longer ask, what does the regulation say? Now they ask, did you see that girl on TikTok who broke down sole source in 3 bullet points and did a lip sync to it? And look, I understand the appeal. TikTok is fast. TikTok is entertaining. And TikTok makes everything look simple. Even stupidity looks efficient on TikTok. And that's the magic trick. It takes topics that are actually nuanced, technically, and highly dependent on facts, and packages them like they're microwave instructions. Need a new subcontracting strategy? Swipe. Need to understand cost realism? Swipe. Need to distinguish price analysis from price justification before DCMA turns your purchasing system into a crime scene? Swipe. Because apparently now the answer to everything is there's a creator who explained it. A creator. Not a contracts manager. Not legal counsel, not a CPSR survivor with the emotional scars and 5 binders of corrective action plans, but a creator. That word alone should concern you. I don't want creators explaining my source selection decisions. I want adults. I want qualified people. I want somebody who is sat in the conference room at 7:40 at night trying to explain to leadership why commercial item is not a personality trait. But no, no. Now we're doing compliance by algorithm. And that, my friends, is how you end up building a purchasing system out of shortcuts. Clips, vibes, and unearned confidence. So today we're talking about social search. We're talking about TikTok expertise. We're talking about people who confuse familiarity with competence. And we're going to talk about what happens when contractors start treating federal compliance like skincare advice. Because a serum recommendation can be wrong and you get a rash. A procurement recommendation can also be wrong, but when it is, you get findings. Very different consequences. And yet, somehow, one of those is now being researched the same way as the other one. Let's get into it.
This broadcast has been cleared for public release, but just barely.
Broadcasting from deep inside the Federal Acquisition Labyrinth, this is the GovCon Show. This show is for acquisition pros, wannabe pros, and procurement insiders who need a place to unpack the chaos. We speak fluent contracting and sarcasm. No clearance required. This is the GovCon Show.
There used to be a time, however imperfect, when if somebody didn't know something in this field, they would at least felt a little shame about it, you know? They'd go look it up. They'd ask somebody that had much more experience. They'd pretend to read the clause, and eventually they'd call contracts. Now, people don't look for the right answer. They look for the fastest answer that sounds emotionally satisfying to them. That's a different ballgame. Because social search is not built to make you compliant. It's built to make you stay. That's the product. The app doesn't care whether you correctly understand subcontract consent, OCI, or TINA, or small business reps, or file documentation standards. All it cares is whether you keep scrolling. And unfortunately, the human brain loves this arrangement. You type in something like, "Can we sole source this subcontract?" And instead of getting the context, the caveats, the thresholds, the exceptions, you get a smiling person with a perfect lighting saying, "Well, here's what contractors don't want you to know." Oh, good. A secret. That's always how compliance starts. Then comes the finger pointing at text on screen, a dramatic pause, a hot take, a song underneath it, and a caption that says, "You've been doing this wrong." Or maybe you're watching a former intern with a ring light and a confidence disorder. That possibility should at least come up, right? Because that's the core problem. Social media rewards certainty, not accuracy. And federal contracting? Federal contracting punishes certainty when it's unsupported. That's why this whole trend is so dangerous. The people who know the most in this field usually sound very careful, very measured, annoyingly nuanced. They'll say things like, "Well, it all depends. We need more facts. That interpretation may not hold under audit. Or maybe we should document the rationale." You know, boring grown-up phrases. But the internet hates that. The internet wants 3 hacks to avoid compliance delays. 5 clauses you can ignore. Absolutely perfect. If that's your goal. If your goal is to become an antidote in somebody else's training deck. And if we're being honest, we will admit that this didn't happen because people suddenly got dumber. It happened because people got busier. Staffs are thinner and more desperate. That matters. And a lot of teams are overloaded. A lot of companies are understaffed. A lot of purchasing and contracts personnel were thrown into jobs without enough training, enough mentorship, enough system discipline. So when a question comes up and they're already late, already underwater, and already being asked why this isn't done yet, what do you think they do? They look for speed. They're not looking for truth, not sufficiency, not defensibility, but speed. And that's where TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Instagram clips and every other bite-sized confidence machine enters the story. Because they don't feel like it's laziness. They think and feel like it's efficiency. And that's the trap. And admit it, we all know that you are not telling yourself, "I'm replacing professional judgment with social media." In your mind, when you're doing that, you're justifying reliance on shorts by thinking or telling yourself, "I'm just getting oriented. I'm just seeing how others think about it." And sure, Sure, sometimes that's all it is. But that's not where it ends, because once a bad answer arrives, it is a polished format. People trust it more than they should. And that's a real problem in government contracting because this field has a lot of people who can sound very authoritative without being authoritative. Frankly, the industry has always had these people. TikTok has just given them the lighting. Social media rewards certainty. Federal contracting punishes certainty when it's not supported. So now let's talk about the kind of nonsense that spreads online very well, because not every bad compliance idea is equally viral. Some of them are too boring to spread, but the real dangerous ones, oh, they will travel beautifully. For example, you don't need all that documentation if the price looks reasonable. Fantastic. Don't you just love that? Sounds efficient. Also, it sounds like the first line of a finding to me. Or what about, if you've got 3 quotes, you're covered. Covered by what? Hope? 3 bad quotes are still 3 bad quotes. 3 non-responsive quotes are still a mess. And then there's the classic. Just use the prior year's price. Oh, yeah. The beloved tradition of pretending yesterday's bad file is today's justification. Prior price is not magic. Historical pricing is not self-authenticating. And that's what we paid before is not an analysis. That's no more than nostalgia. And nostalgia is not a control mechanism. Then, of course, we get to my favorite. This is commercial, so the rules are a lot lighter. Lighter? What a beautiful word. Like we're discussing summer linens or something, No. Different does not mean careless. Simplified does not mean undocumented. Commercial does not mean vibe your way through it. But online, nuance dies immediately. Nuance gets no clicks. Nuance has no soundtrack. But you know what does get clicks? A person saying, here's how to avoid all that red tape. See, that phrase alone should trigger a stress reaction because in our world, avoiding red tape often translates to we're creating tomorrow's documentation crisis today. And that brings us to the deeper issue. A lot of people today cannot tell the difference between a shortcut and a system collapse. And that's a huge problem in most contractor environments because a legitimate efficiency exists. A smart process improvement exists. A cleaner workflow exists. A better template exists. A faster and still compliant method absolutely exists. But so does cutting corners and calling it innovation or agile contracting. And those are not the same thing. One is process maturity. The other is no more than lipstick on a policy violation. But online, they're packaged identically. It has the same soundtrack, the same confident tone, the same smiling face, and the same nobody talks about this setup. And if you don't already know the difference, you are extremely vulnerable to being impressed by an absolute nonsense message. And that's what worries me most, personally. It's not the existence of bad advice. There's always been bad advice. It's the format. The format makes weak thinking feel actionable. And in our field, people often adopt what they can explain quickly, not what they can defend later. And that's how bad habits take root. First, it's, I saw a clip on this. Then it's, I've seen a few people say the same thing. And before you know it, it becomes, this seems to be the best practice. And 6 months later, everyone's acting like a rumor with subtitles has become procurement doctrine. That's how institutional stupidity is born. Institutional stupidity is not one giant act of recklessness, but instead, it's 1,000 tiny shortcuts. Shortcuts that no one stopped. I hope you all realize that 3 quotes is not a price analysis. 3 quotes can also be just 3 pieces of evidence. Evidence that nobody knew what they were doing. And the emotional side of this, because that's really where the algorithm wins, people don't just want answers. They want relief. They want somebody to tell them, no, you're fine. This isn't that serious. You don't need to overcomplicate it, or maybe everyone does it this way. This is incredibly seductive when you're tired, especially in environments where operations is breathing down your neck. Finance wants the action done. Programs wants the subcontracts issued yesterday. And the customer is escalating. And the contracts team is already carrying the emotional residue of 17 previous bad decisions. That's when social media advice starts to feel like a warm blanket. Granted, a deeply flammable blanket, but a warm blanket, because it reduces anxiety without reducing the risk. That's the key distinction. Real expertise may not make you feel better immediately. Sometimes real expertise is profoundly annoying. Real expertise says, no, this needs more work. No, I'm not going to sign that. Your file isn't ready yet. No, that rationale's too weak. You're using the word market research wrong. You're using it to describe a conversation you had in the hallway. That doesn't feel good, but it protects you. TikTok expertise does the opposite. It gives you emotional permission to move on. And people love that. They love being told their instincts are good, their shortcuts are clever, and their messy documentation will probably be just fine. Probably one of the most destructive words in government contracting. Probably fine. Probably enough. That's probably acceptable. Probably won't be reviewed. And it probably doesn't matter. That entire family of thinking has destroyed more procurement files than incompetence ever could, because incompetence can sometimes be fixed with training. But comfortable overconfidence? Man, that is a harder disease. Now, I want to be fair. Not everything on TikTok or Instagram or any of the other short form platforms is garbage. There are smart people online. There are practitioners sharing genuinely useful information with a very useful perspective. There are creators who can simplify without misleading. And there are people doing good educational work That's all true. But here's the issue. Good content is not the same thing as sufficient content. A short clip can introduce you to an idea. It can flag a risk. It can point you toward a topic. It can make you aware of something you should explore. But what it can't do, at least not responsibly, it cannot substitute for full analysis in a fact-specific compliance environment. That's the line. A clip can say, hey, watch out for subcontract flowdowns. Okay, great. A clip can not determine, though, which flowdowns apply to your particular subcontract based on contract type, or your customer requirements, or the terms of the scope, the risk, and the negotiation posture, and it can't determine the prime level obligations. Doing that is on you. That is called work. That's what you get paid for. Making those calls is actual work. The kind with judgment. A clip can say, document your price analysis. Okay, wonderful. But what a clip cannot perform the price analysis for you. It cannot evaluate the support, test the compatibility, explain the differences, assess the adequacy. Nor can it write the file narrative in a way that survives scrutiny. Again, this is not content. This is work. And too many people are confusing awareness with execution. That's like watching a 30-second video on surgery and then saying, oh, well, I understand the concept. No, you don't. You do not. You understand the thumbnail is what you understand. Look, all I'm getting at here is that TikTok can raise awareness, but it cannot carry your compliance burden for you. A clip is not a control. So what do you do instead? First, use social media for signals, not conclusions. That's the healthy way to use it. If you hear about a topic online, fine. If a tip gives you a question to ask internally, fine. But the moment it starts influencing actions, approvals, file strategy, negotiation posture, compliance interpretation, or even policy deviation, you need to leave the app and enter adulthood, I guess. Go to the source, read the clause, read the policy, read the procedure, read the contract, read the subcontract, read the file, talk to somebody qualified. I know, it's disgusting actual effort, but that's your job. And again, you have to remember, that's why you get paid. Second, build internal systems that reduce the temptation of staff to outsource their judgment. Because people reach for bad shortcuts when good tools are missing. If your team doesn't have usable procedures, good examples, good templates, review guides, training, or access to senior experienced support, then of course they're going to look elsewhere. That's not just a people issue, that's a system issue. When your internal house is weak, the algorithm becomes your advisor, and that should terrify you. Third, train your people on why something matters. The why. Why is so important. Train them on the why and not just what to do. because routine processes alone will not save you. If someone does not understand the purpose of a price analysis or a competition documentation, flow downs, they don't understand file logic or procurement integrity, then the first catchy shortcut they hear will sound plausible. Understanding creates resistance to nonsense. Fourth, normalize saying, I don't know, let's verify. That sentence alone could save half this industry. But for some reason, people would rather be confidently wrong than carefully competent. Because careful competence, it's not trendy. It doesn't trend. But let me tell you something. The corrective action plan you write after an audit, that's a very bad place to discover that you confuse charisma with expertise. So here's the closing truth. Social platforms are not the enemy. Stupidity is the enemy. Laziness is the enemy. Undisciplined systems are the enemy. Untrained teams are the enemy. Leadership cultures that reward movement over defensibility are our enemy. TikTok didn't create that. It just exposed it. It gave it music and captions. It gave it a way to spread. Okay, guys, if you've enjoyed this episode of the GovCon Show, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a thumbs up or a like, and share this post. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it. I know you want to. If you want to know more about us, check out our team at govconadvisorygroup.com. Or if you'd like to benefit from some additional contracts training courses or sessions, head over to contractsclassroom.com. Don't forget, we're broadcasting from deep within the Federal Acquisition Labyrinth. And this episode has been cleared for public release, but just barely. See you soon.
If today's episode sounded a little too familiar, that's probably a sign. Until next time, keep your files tight, your logic tighter. Remember, if your compliance approach is built on checking boxes, you're building risk. We'll see you next time on the GovCon Show.
This broadcast has been cleared for public release, but just barely.